Our lives are laid out on a road of bumps, turns, struggles, and more. How do we respond? How do we endure adversity for learning and growth? I'm Aubrey Johnson, and we'll explore these questions and more on The Road to Rediscovery. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Road to Rediscovery. I'm your host, Aubrey Johnson. The Road to Rediscovery is about reflecting on life lessons to learn and grow from them, and of course, pay it forward and uplift others who are struggling through dark times. I'm proud to announce that the Road to Rediscovery has partnered with a new platform called Featured Up. Here you can engage with me or any of my guests by asking them or asking a question or mentioning, a comment that you may have. All questions will be read in a future episode, which means you'll get a shout out. You also have the option to leave a voluntary tip. Just visit www.featuredup.com/rediscover. That's www.featuredup.com/rediscover, and feel free to tell us what is on your mind. As always, we are truly, truly grateful for your listenership. Now, my special guest is a manifestation and twin flame coach, law of attraction master. On a mission to reshape lives through a holistic approach, merging the gap between science and spirituality. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure. Please help me welcome Mr. Kurt Johnson to the show. Kurt, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here. How are you doing today?
It's a pleasure to be here, sir. How are you?
I am doing fantastic, and we are thrilled to have you here. We can't wait to dig into this conversation, and the listeners are eager as well, without a doubt. So, Kurt, to start us off, I want to make sure we lay the foundation here, okay, when it comes to the term manifestation. We hear it a lot. We see it in movies, or we see it talked about in movies, on TV, maybe daytime talk shows, who knows? And if you can just set the record straight for us, okay, by explaining to the listeners what manifestation is, and then share, if you can, what is the distinction of your methods and guidance that separates it from just mere manifestation techniques?
Sure. So the law of attraction is the law. It's like gravity. Whatever it is that you are being will be drawn to you in your own personal reality. So your very personality becomes your own personal reality. So what it is that you are being, and those things show up in your thinking mind as what we would ordinarily call beliefs.
Yeah.
Now, what sets me apart, I guess, in this space is the fascinating observation that darn near half of the science community, and I'm talking some pretty important people, not just, some guy in his basement or something like that, top shelf physicists, mathematicians, and these types are starting to recognize that consciousness must be fundamental to what we think of as reality. And it's from this unexplainable cosmic force that the mental universe came from, and thus physical reality. There's a very interesting new theory emerging in the physics community called information realism, which posits that the universe is mind. And this is the kind of stuff Hermetic philosophy has been teaching for thousands of years. That's the core teaching every great law of attraction guru ought to know of, ancient Hermetic philosophy. And it would seem physics is actually proving out these things. We are living in a participatory universe. You are mind, and the universe is mind. And on an energetic level, you integrate with that divine matrix, and you can cause physical change in your 3D reality through what you are believing. And I want to reiterate this point. This is where I stand out, because I get out of bed every day. I get on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram with a giant megaphone, and I go, it's real science. And there's real top shelf physicists talking about this. They're not talking about this on television.
Right.
Television is a distraction. It's not all bad, but they give you the impression that we live in this dead universe. You're just a bag of bones. There's no such thing as telepathy. Nobody knows what happens to you when you die, et cetera, et cetera. And it was never true. You're a creator.
So I want to talk about the power of the mind, and how as you say, the universe is the mind, and how it can affect or cause a physical effect or a physical change. A lot of people go around and they just loosely, casually say the term mind over matter, right? So when but there's some truth behind that, it sounds like. I mean, not sure what is the crossing point, so to speak, or the crossroads between where the stimulus or stimuli of, say, the mind impacts the physical part, and where do we even say that exists? Do we say that exists within our within our soul, our personal being, or is it, like you said, the universe? Where does it start, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Well, I think what you're asking for is the link between mind and physical reality. Now, if you ask a physicist, they're going to call it information rather than mind.
Okay.
Because it sounds more objective, I suppose. And they're not wrong. But if you press them on the issue a little bit, they're going to go, yeah, I'm talking about mind. Right?
Yeah,
Grace Shayton is a pretty well-known mathematician. He supplies mathematical constants to the physics world, PhD, lots of accolades. He rubs shoulders with the again, top shelf physicists, Lothar Schaefer, for example, Christoph Cook, and these types. I don't expect your audience to know who they are, but if your audience does know who they are, they're going to be like, really? These guys are the ones that are talking about this stuff? Right. So where the mental universe, the information universe, converges with 3D physical reality is what you would call the Higgs field, which is something that they've recently discovered does actually exist. It's been a hypothesis for a long time. The Large Hadron Super Collider in France, they have realized that these higher planes of existence do exist. So the Higgs field, the electron field, all of these different quantum planes interact with one another. Now, the Higgs field, its job is to realize a potential into an actual physical electron particle. So the way that, say, an electron, for example, which is a physical object, manifests is through a function called the collapse of the wave, which can be observed during the double slit experiment. And, they've known about this for a little over 100 years. They've never really been able to explain it, still can't really explain it. But the Higgs field is a discovery that's getting us one step closer. The Higgs field facilitates 3D physical matter actually becoming such from a bath of potential, which means information. And that sounds very abstract, and it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a field of potential outcomes, of possibilities.
Right.
The quantum field. So a particle that can be in one place or all places at the same time. The Higgs field is what seems to cause that particle to do so. Now, the science community is pursuing the why. Like, why does that happen when it happens? And the lead they have is the observer effect. And one of the great debates between materialist scientists and now information scientists has been, what is the cause of the observer effect? Is it really a measurement, or is that information stored somewhere in the universe through a conscious presence? Consciousness also, so you've got this mechanism which I've just described, and then you also have physicists recognizing that consciousness must be this unexplainable cosmic force which is out there somewhere. It's non-local, and they've proven this thousands of times, that consciousness is not coming from inside the brain, it's out there somewhere. So there is this field of intelligence. It's like we're living in a sea of intelligent mental energy, and you're interacting with it. People who master manifestation, you'll notice, for example, like when things are about to take place for you, you'll start to notice odd synchronicities in the world around you. You'll hear about these kinds of things from spiritual people. Well, now science is saying this is a very real possibility. And again, this is not crackpot science. These are top shelf physicists talking about this stuff, that consciousness appears to be a cosmic force that we live within, and it's interacting with you. Mm-hmm. And the proof is pretty convincing when you consider the fact that they've duplicated these experiments thousands of times. They're not going to talk about this in the mainstream. So quantum field theory is that link between physical reality and the mental universe. Now, where you are connected is at the level of the mental universe, which is you could call it personality. So you could think of the personality like cloud storage, for example, right?
Yeah.
So with cloud storage, you have cookies that are stored on the computer, and they know where to go access the files from the clouds. Well, there are neurons and nerve endings in your physical body, which would be equivalent to the cookies, accessing what we think of as a personality, which is stored in a cloud. I'm sure you've heard of people who can see auras and things like that. So that literally, like a person's aura would be that person's personality. So it's a cloud of energy. The energy consists of information. The information is retained thought and emotional patterns, memories, a history, a story of who I am as a person, right? I'm a mom, I'm a brother, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a teacher, I'm liberal, I'm conservative, I've been to these places. All the memories, experiences that you've had are stored in that cloud system. But it is that energy body that integrates with the mental plane too. And your interaction with that mental plane causes physical things to manifest in the 3D. And again, we are just barely starting to realize that there are actual mechanisms that can cause something like this. For example, again, the Higgs field, which is a direct link between this field of information and physical reality. So to posit that something that you are being, like what your personality is being, what you are being, can actually reverberate and cause changes on the 3D plane, that's on the table.
Yeah, I see.
And it's really
So
fun to talk about.
yeah, no, it is. Well, it's fascinating, and I'll be honest with you, Kurt. I mean, you know, as you're speaking through this, I'm trying to walk through it with you, and I am still trying to grasp certain ideas and concepts that you shared, and you kept going, and I want you to keep going. Don't get me wrong, and so it gives me something to think about. It's very very fascinating, and so it, to be the actual the essence of being is deeper than the essence of just thinking, it sounds like. So um, you have a deeper connection when people uh, are master at manifestation. Um, it seems like they connect at a deeper level, a level of being versus a level of thinking
Mm-hmm.
to that other world to realize their potential, to realize their dreams, to realize what it is they want out of life. And from there, can that be the birth of transformation and helping someone turn their
Yes,
lives around? Because that's what
absolutely.
I'd like for us to get to, right? People who
100%.
are okay, great. They're struggling, they're going through problems, not just people who everyday lives like perhaps you and I and I mean we're not homeless, no addictions, nothing like that. And so, we want something. We want, I don't know, a new truck, manifest a new truck, or we
Mm-hmm.
want a new house, or we want to build a log cabin, or we want to take a 2-month hike through Europe. Can we bring that to fruition, right? But my focus would be on people who are struggling, people who are homeless, people who
Mm-hmm.
do have addictions, people with codependencies, people who have hard times struggling through the loss of a loved one, and bankruptcy. I mean, the list goes on, right? Uh, this is something that they can realize and connect at that being level
Mm-hmm.
to to get an answer, right? Or to understand what their potential is and how they should proceed with their lives.
And I love that you brought that up. You know what I tell my manifesting students? I tell them 80 to 90% of your manifesting game is your Zen game. And what I mean
Yeah.
by that is the pure being of self,
Yes.
which of course comes before mind, because ultimately you are not your mind. The mind
Yes.
is an extension of the true self. And actually, you could think of the mind as an engine, whereas the true self or soul, if you will, is like the gas tank. So you really can't put the cart before the horse. Another analogy perhaps would be, the true self is an astronaut, the mind is a spacesuit. And spacesuit's not going to do anything for you if you don't remember who you are as
Right.
an eternal being.
Yeah.
And to access the true self is so much simpler than people realize, because there's nothing really for you to access. This is where euphemism breaks completely down, because really what you're doing is just remembering yourself as the consciousness. This is why
Hmm.
mindfulness meditation is so popular in
Yes.
spiritual communities, because you're able to experience yourself as this awareness of the mind.
Yes. Yes.
And it really is that simple.
Wow. And I am a huge advocate for mindful meditation, controlled breathing. I practice it every day and I try to get deeper and deeper in it with each passing month. And so and I'm so glad you brought that up, Kurt, because to me that sounds like another component in connecting to that I don't even know what to call it, the other side or the that intangible world. I mean,
The divine
I
matrix.
divine matrix. I mean, I'm trying to find the proper, the proper description for it, but there is there is a level of, I don't want to say surrealism, but there's a level of just connectedness that I
Right.
feel when I meditate, and I am doing it with my mind being in the present and observing within myself every little detail from my breath to my heartbeat and so forth.
Hmm.
And then I feel like I'm connecting with something. I just don't know what, but I feel relieved after I come back to center, come back
Hmm.
physically in my room, the four walls and everything. And so I, I'm wondering if I could mentally visualize in my mind's eye what this looks like in meditation. I'm wondering if it's like meditation, spiritual side, and then I get that connectedness. Not quite sure what it is, but is it crossing a bridge to something scientific? I mean,
Of
what is
course.
that? Is that what it is?
Well, I mean, science is really just the pursuit of knowledge.
Yeah.
Um, you could call it crossing a bridge.
Okay.
I suppose a teacher of non duality would say that it's more of a remembering that the bridge was already there
I see.
and you just are that.
I see.
And that's hard for people to grasp because we live in separation.
Yeah.
We perceive ourselves as being separate from all. But what you're articulating is unity consciousness, which is where you experience yourself as everything. And
Yeah.
it's not conceptual. You don't think it, you feel it, you
Yeah.
experience that. It's beyond mind, and it's what you already are. It's as if you're a wave on the ocean, and for a moment, you remember that you are the whole ocean.
Mm.
And it's like you're just shown a glimpse of that.
Yeah. 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 Kurt, it's going to sound like I'm going backwards here, but I just had to ask, how early in your journey did you feel led to pursue law of attraction and manifestation? I mean, did you feel it as a calling early on, or were you inspired by a person or an event?
Well, I had my forced spiritual awakening about 6 years ago, and
Mhm.
that's when I really started taking it seriously. I'd heard things about it before
Yeah.
then, um, but after my awakening, it just seemed so natural. It just seemed so obvious to me
Yeah.
that this is just something I'm going to do now. I didn't even have to question it. And I just started
Mhm.
watching law of attraction videos. And, I've got a pretty scientific mind. I'm extremely knowledgeable about science. So
Yeah.
when I started trying it out and it worked, that's when I was like, okay, I have to know how this works. There's
Yes.
something to this. And it
Yes.
didn't take me very long to figure out that we're already there.
We're
There's
already there.
already people hot on the trail proving that, yeah, we seem to live in this simulation.
Yeah.
I remember before my awakening, I heard Elon Musk talking about that once. And I was
Yeah.
like, what are they talking about? It was maybe
Yeah.
like 10, 12 years ago. And now I completely get it.
I got you. I got you. Um, Now, this next question I had for you, Kurt, if in your explanation a few minutes ago, if you have already articulated this, I apologize in advance. But this is a two-part question. Okay. First off, is um, I'm wondering how I'm wondering how your your methods and your guidance in working with your manifestation students. Um, if you can give an example of how you are making the effort to bridge that gap between spirituality and science. You know what? Instead of me asking that second part question, if we can just kind of hone in on that
Mm-hmm.
right now, and I gave a weak mental example of my meditation, cross it over. But in your practices with the many people you work with, what's a technique that gives the effort of narrowing that gap between the 2?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I got a really simple answer, really good one, straightforward. You're going to love this. The scientific method, which is try something out and see what happens, more or less. There's more to it than that.
Sure, sure,
But
sure.
you create a hypothesis, you try it out.
Yep,
If you get the result that you thought you would get, you try it out again. And
yep,
if you keep getting the same result, you've got something. So when you focus on a goal, when you choose to manifest something and you believe it's going to happen, you cause yourself to believe that it's going to happen. It is at that moment you release attachment to outcome and you trust the divine that
yeah,
it's going to bring it to me.
right.
And you wait patiently. It shows up and you go, huh,
Interesting.
is that a
I,
coincidence? I'm going to try it again. So you
yeah,
try it a couple of more times.
yeah,
And like I said, if you get the same result 3 times, you got something there. That's a
yeah,
science experiment.
yeah.
And another thing too, I do in like my manifesting video program, I hit the science pretty hard and I show people real scientists talking about this stuff. Lothar Schaefer, Christoph Cook, these types of
Yeah,
guys, they're all over YouTube talking about this stuff. And
yeah,
these are serious minds. They oversee large university science departments,
yeah,
multiple PhDs. They've written hundreds of peer-reviewed research papers. These are the guys talking about this stuff. Pretty incredible. And again, why aren't we talking about this on TV? I don't know. It just doesn't get ratings. TV is there to get you to watch commercials. I mean, if you think about it, they want you to watch their advertisements, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they're just not
yeah,
interested. Well, that doesn't
yeah.
mean it's not real.
Well, no, and that can be numbing over time for sure.
Yeah.
And
I stopped
yeah,
watching TV a long time ago.
yeah, but this is enriching. I mean, I can't begin to describe this. As you said, these are some heavy hitters that are coming to the table with these findings and papers and theses and who knows, maybe even TED Talks and that sort of thing. Um, and speaking of that, Kurt, okay, uh, for many years, generations even, we've always heard of the long time conflict or question between um, between religion and science or evolution, right? Or religion, evolution, religion, caveman, Adam and Eve, those sorts of things. So I wanted to get your take on science and spirituality, okay, which I guess old school science, they were pretty polarizing, and I don't think old school scientists were even in the realm of spirituality when it came to their studies. I could be wrong because science is not my background, but that's what I would assume in old school science. I'm talking in the 30s, the 40s, and 50s. But I want to know from you, is there a dependency factor of one over the other, or do they complement each other? Is there a relation between the two?
Mhm.
And if you can explore
Yeah.
that.
Old school science, which I think the proper term is material science, which means we're looking in materiel, we're looking in physical matter.
Yeah.
It's material science.
Mhm.
is not invalid. And I get it. Like, you see Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye, and they've never really contributed anything. They're just kind of talking heads, but they do act as an edifice for the material scientist, where your typical material scientist is going to have a little bit of a snooty, kind of pompous, like, well, you got to prove it.
Yeah.
And side note, they want to know where the physical universe came from by looking in physical matter. And that's not a bad place to start. They've made a lot of headway. It's amazing because the deeper they dig into physical matter, they keep finding energy. You can ask a material scientist, hey, man, some guy on this podcast said that they've never actually proven the existence of matter. And he's going to go, yeah, it's made out of energy. Now, be that as it may, in spite of the fact that the scientific endeavor and the institution of science, which are the people who have those types of kind of negative attitudes, they can be mutually exclusive. But in spite of all this, I would describe material scientist as simply incomplete. It's not the whole picture. It is valid. Obviously, look at all the amazing technologies that you and I are using to communicate with right now. Pretty impressive what they've been able to accomplish, but it is incomplete. Now, information science, which is this more abstract type of science, that is also incomplete. So there is kind of a yin and yang between those two things.
I see.
Now, interesting side note, by the way, that I wanted to mention.
Yeah.
The scientific endeavor itself and even the institution of science started in philosophy hundreds of years ago. And, materialist scientists, they don't appreciate it when you point that out.
They don't.
But it did. It started in philosophy.
Okay. So that leads me to ask.
I was just going to say, it seems like science is going back to philosophy.
Yeah. Where it all began, right? And that makes it almost seem full circle. So based on that statement you made right there, Kurt, and again, I'm asking this for the benefit of the listeners, to propose that that they take a deeper sense of thinking as we discuss these things, and then see how it can apply to their lives. Is it safe to say that every physical action or reaction that takes place is a result of something intangible? I don't know, like energy or something intangible that started, that no one can see or feel or sense, but all of a sudden this happens. Let's give an example. Here's an example. I don't know if it's easy or hard, but tsunami. A tsunami. That's a strong physical event. Very physical.
Lots of potential energy.
Yes. So, I mean, is it safe to say something like that is a result of something intangible? I mean, unless you're a scientist and you've been investigating all this time beneath the Earth's surface, to see or anticipate something like this happen. Let's say we're an everyday Joe. We're living our lives. There is no visible sense around us just yet that in 6 months a tsunami's going to hit. If that makes sense,
right?
Is that safe to say that just about every physical action or event is spawned from something intangible or something energy
from, like some event on one of these higher planes that I speak of?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's where I was trying to get to. Yeah, the higher planes.
Yeah, I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I don't think it's necessarily that it's where one always causes the other, although I've heard people say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can see why they would say that.
Hmm.
But I don't feel like there's enough evidence either way. And what makes more sense in my mind is that the two play off of each other. They work
Yes.
in tandem. There's an interconnectedness between the physical and the higher planes.
I understand. I understand. So Curtin, with the many people that you've worked with, and guided and coached, um, have you, as the coach, as the one giving guidance, have you, or is there a physical sense in working with a person that they have discovered or rediscovered who they truly are, their truer self?
Mm-hmm. That happens a lot, especially with
Yeah.
my twin flame students, which is a very in your face, raw spiritual awakening. It's not what the internet says it is.
No.
And I deal with that all day long. It starts out very, very painfully, but if you know what to do, it turns out to be the best thing that's ever happened to you, ever.
Oh, wow. Really?
And there is such a deep remembrance of who
Yeah.
you are
Yeah.
beyond the physical world that it's beyond description. It's beyond concept. And that is your true nature. You are beyond mind.
Was this your breakthrough that you had early on when, like 6 years ago, you were talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And
Wow.
all throughout my life, I've caught glimpses. I've got
Mhm.
stories to tell going all the way back to 5 years old. I had an out of body experience. I was visited by physical angels,
Yeah. Yeah.
physical apparitions.
Wow.
Um, yeah, I've had some crazy shit happen throughout my life. And 6 years ago, my forced awakening, that's when the envelope really opened up.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
no going back. It was
Yeah.
such an epiphany, to say the least.
Yeah.
But to have the limitations of ego just completely ripped away once and for all, no looking back. And
But
I deal
yeah.
with that in my coaching program every day, 7,000 students that I've coached, and
Yeah.
everybody's going through it. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Gives you a completely different perspective on life, outlook on life, the environment immediately around you, and and
Mm-hmm.
and 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 a more introspective observance of who you are. And I was
Mm-hmm.
going to ask you in what ways or changes you've noticed after that forced awakening, and you already answered it for me, and I appreciate that, man. I mean, because again, right between the eyes, loss of ego, and just understanding just how wasteful and damaging it can be, and
Mm-hmm.
putting that aside and maybe even laughing a bit afterwards because you're like, "I can't believe I held on
Absolutely.
to this all this
Mm-hmm.
time." You know?
Yep.
So that is a true example of, a change in perspective after an awakening like that. Have you had any of your, students, um, reach a sense of self or their truer selves where they discovered or rediscovered their purpose in life is to serve others?
Happens all the time.
Nice.
Not
Nice.
everybody.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of those myths that's out there.
Yeah.
Although, well, let me finish that thought first, because one of the myths that you see about spirituality is when you awaken, you want to be in service to others,
Yes.
or you must do that,
Yes.
which is antithetical to spiritualism because spiritual is not a personality type. and there's
Right.
no requirements. It's absolute freedom.
Yes.
Now, it just so happens that a large portion of them do.
Yeah.
Now, as to the rest, the flip side of the coin is, well, are they? Is it true that they are not in service to others? Is that
Yeah.
true? Because for two reasons. Number one, people whose consciousness is explosive, such as these, all they have to do is show up at the grocery store and people want to talk to them.
Yeah.
People just want to be around them all the time. And they
Yeah.
always end up in situations where they are helping friends and family and stuff like that. Even though they're not trying to do it, and they don't feel a calling to do it.
Right.
It always seems to just happen, and they always just know what to do. So that's the first thing. The second thing about this other group of people is, you could literally sit on your couch and just be really good at meditating, and your consciousness is dumping out onto the physical plane like a fountain. And that does have an effect on the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So I think technically the answer all around is yes.
Okay.
Even if for some of the people it doesn't not have that appearance outwardly.
Yeah.
It's still happening.
It's still happening. Understood. And one of the last questions I have for you, Kurt, is these awakenings. They sound like they're true, complete breakthroughs, and they have the potential
Breakdown is more like it.
break down to build up. Maybe, I don't know, but a breakdown
is fair. But you know, the ego has to be torn away first, and it's really painful. Oh my God, I'd never want to do that again.
You know what? Oh my goodness. It's funny you mentioned that, because I had a guest on here maybe 2 months ago, and it sounds like conceptually, it sounds like what he was talking about. He says when something, there's a moment when you have to burn, and I guess it's the burning of the ego, and
ego
he
death.
said it's like eco death, where he says after you burn, you're still on fire, like a phoenix. You're rising from the ashes, and you have to burn before you can rise above the ashes. And what's burning that you're leaving is the ego. And I find that I sense parallels from it, and I'm not trying to speak for him or you, but I just wanted to point out that to me just kind of sounded very, very similar. That means that, hey, I think we're on to something here when it comes.
There is a template.
There is.
Yes.
Gotcha.
This kind of forced spiritual awakening template. It's a thing.
Okay. So with these forced spiritual awakenings, again, the awakening, transformative. Okay. Breakdown, breakthrough, however break we want to say. However, would it be safe to say that there's your life to a certain point, then there's the awakening, and then there's post awakening? Okay. And so from the awakening, early stages of it, and you're still trying to grasp, okay, what is this? What am I supposed to learn from this? Where's my direction from here? Is there an infancy stage shortly after the awakening that you're still trying to figure things out? And then from that awakening, post, as time goes on and as you learn more and discover more and live that different perspective, you start to reach maturity in that awakening.
Totally.
Is there a, does it work like that, sort of?
Yeah,
maybe.
And I think the infancy stage, most of it is, why is this happening to me, and what do I do about it?
Yes.
And it's a lot of thinking and emoting. But when you move past that, you recognize that thinking and emoting isn't necessary. It isn't bad.
Right.
Because as soon as you say it's bad, that's actually the thinker. The ego judges itself.
Yes. Yes.
But you realize it's not really needed. You can
Mhm.
do that. Now, what is interesting in manifesting, for example, which is like the next kind of obvious thing that you're going to do, everybody who goes through an awakening, they end up there. They end up in a
Okay.
place where they realize they're having an effect on the physical world around them. Well,
Yeah.
anyway, you start thinking about how you think.
Kind of meta.
And yeah, it is. But it takes that higher level of awareness to begin with. So going back to what we were discussing earlier, which is 80 to 90% of your manifesting game is your Zen game. Or if you ask
Yeah.
my assistant coach, she's going to go 80 to 90 million% of your manifesting game is your
Million.
Zen game. It's like, think of it like, here you go. Learning to ride a bike.
Yeah.
This will dovetail in perfectly with your question. Learning to ride a bike, because there's that whole phase where you're trying to do it and you keep falling off the bike a bunch, and
Yeah.
you have to concentrate on what you're doing, but then eventually you can do it. And it's like 20 years later, if you've never ridden a bike in 20 years, if you pick one up, you can just start doing it again. It's like that.
Yes.
Like you don't even have to think about it anymore. You just do it.
Yes. And you know what? And again, it's just my way of relating to what you're saying. My background is talent development, and so there's this matrix when it comes to um, conscious incompetence, and then
Mhm,
you want to get to a point where it's subconscious or unconscious
mhm,
competence, right? Where you're competent, you can ride the bike, but it's really subconsciously. I mean, you don't even think about it. To your point, right?
mhm,
And in the beginning, you're focusing on every little thing, the handlebars, the pedals, and everything, and
mhm,
but you're not really competent in riding it, but you're putting all this energy in the conscious side, on the conscious side. So but yeah, that's a great example, Kurt. I appreciate that, because that helps me understand then, like you said, from the awakening, there are those stages, right? The infancy stage.
you're going to
Why is this
stumble a little
happening to
bit.
me? Yeah,
And
yeah.
the internet does not help. It's just
No.
anybody can say anything they want to say on the internet.
Yeah,
And usually, what you're going to get from the general spiritual community is healing, 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 karma, healing, karma, 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 healing, healing.
yeah.
And I understand what they're saying, but healing does not cause self actualization.
No.
And there's nothing wrong with healing, but it's psychology. And we already know about psychology. Most of the healing that you're going to get, the healing stuff you're going to get from the internet, is pretty poor as far as psychology is concerned. And you don't even need to do that. You can't think your way into spiritual. Spiritual is not a personality type. So
Right.
you got to watch out for that. And
Yep.
that's something that my students deal with a lot. And I don't say that to disparage anybody. It's just,
Sure.
it's very confusing to the beginner student.
Mhm.
And that's kind of something that I find I have to deal with a lot. Um, but on the other hand, it's not all bad because it's keeping me very busy,
Sure,
and I don't
sure.
mind that.
No. No, it helps the time pass, for sure. Oh, man, Kurt, man, this has been a very, very, enlightening conversation. I've learned a lot from just what you've shared, and, I'll be honest with you, I think it'll be a good 2 or 3 hours after this conversation that some of the things you've said will be replaying in my mind, man, that
You're
I'm
going to
trying to
start sinking
grasp,
in.
right? Yeah, it'll
Hmm.
start sinking in, and I'm trying to grasp the meaning behind it and so forth. So, I really, truly appreciate this conversation, Kurt. How can the listeners follow you, learn more about your great work, and hear more insights from you and what you do?
You bet. Newworldallstar.com, ALLSTAR, newworldallstar.com. And I've also got a really great YouTube channel.
Fantastic. New World All Star. allstar.com.
Yes, sir.
And they can search. Well, I guess I'm sure they can click to your YouTube channel from your website and subscribe.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Fantastic.
You got it.
Oh,
Instagram, Facebook, all those places too.
from the website. Fantastic.
Yep.
Well, you guys, you heard it here. newworldallstar.com. We're going to make that the Genesis point that we'll include in the episode show notes. And we'll also mention in the show notes. From there, you can access and follow Kurt on the social mediums that he has provided on his website, as well as subscribe to his YouTube channel where he shares even more insights, maybe an infinite number of insights, from versus what we talked about here. We just scratched the surface.
Yeah, we
And
just scratched
that,
the surface.
yeah, for sure. And that just whets the appetite for the listener to go learn more, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we're lifelong learners on this road. And so, we should always have that thirst for knowledge. Once again, Kurt Johnson, man, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I hope we can stay in touch and bring you back on the show again real soon.
Likewise, it's been a pleasure.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening. And look, as always, we want our listeners to know that when we're dealing with life struggles, you're never alone, and there's always hope. I ask that you please share this show with someone you know who needs inspiration and support. We're all on this journey of life, but it sure feels good having you on the road with me. Thanks again for listening. We'll chat again soon. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of The Road to Rediscovery. We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email at roadtorediscoverypodcast@gmail.com and leave us any questions or comments you may have.